This is a tutorial of the game New York Zoo as played on Board Game Arena. New York Zoo is a polyomino game where you are trying to fill your zoo with polyominoes and animals the fastest, and whoever finishes filling up their space will win. There is no points at the end of the game. It is simply who can get their zoo filled the fastest, though the first, second, third, and fourth in terms of the way that BGA ranks will be determined by how many spaces are left. So if I fill mine first and then this player has 2 left and this one 3, then that's the order that they will be ranked in the end of the game. That said, the main goal is to fill your board, and everything that you're doing towards this is trying to fill up that board. And you fill up the board in a couple of ways. First, by adding these polyomino shapes to your board, and then also by adding these attraction tiles once you fill up those polyominoes with animals. You can see their boards look slightly different. There's a significant first player advantage in this game, so the first player has to fill more, and they have less of what these are of these barns as opposed to the second, third, and fourth player. And we'll explain what those barns are in a minute here. On your turn, you will look at the board up here. So this board here is a large rondel. It goes round and round, and there's an elephant that's kind of determining where you have options to move. So when it is your turn, you take the elephant and you can move between 1 and in this case 4 spaces ahead, because we have 4 players. If it were a 3-player game, you could move up 1 to 3 spaces ahead. What is a space? A space is either a polyomino space. Now these are stacks of 3 polyominoes. They're not the same size. They're different sizes underneath, or different shapes underneath, but they're each stacks of 3. And then these blue spots are where you can get more animals. So in this case, this elephant can go here, 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 or here. These brown spaces are not spaces that you go on. You skip over them, but they do trigger a breeding event, which we'll talk about in a minute. So you choose on your turn to go 1 to 4 spaces and do one of 2 things. Either get a polyomino and place it in your zoo, or get animals and place them either on enclosures that you already have. That's what these polyominoes are, enclosures, or place them in your barns if you have room for them. When you land on a polyomino, you take that polyomino and you place it anywhere in the barn. You don't have to touch the edge or connect other ones. The only rules are you can't overlap and you can't go over the edge. You might wonder what this green space is. Different boards based on number of players have different sizes, so this is just kind of extra decoration spot. You can flip, rotate, do whatever you want to the polyomino to make it fit. It does have to fit within your zoo, and again, can't overlap. When you place a polyomino, you have to place an animal on it. So one of the most important rules is that each enclosure, each polyomino, can only have one type of animal on it. There are 5 different types of animals here: foxes, penguins, kangaroos, flamingos, and meerkats. I couldn't think of it. And when you choose to put a certain type on a polyomino, that's the only type that you put on. So if I went here and put that polyomino down, and then I put, let's say, one of these penguins on it, because everybody starts out with 2 animals in their barns here, then now the only thing I can put in that is penguins, or flamingos, or whatever I put in first. So as you can see, this first player went 1, 2, 3, 4, went here, took that polyomino, and placed it in their enclosure, or placed theirs in their zoo. You can see there's a new one underneath it. They now have to place an animal in the new enclosure. That animal can come from either one of your barns. This is kind of just like a holding area. The first player has 2 spots, second and third players have 3 spots, the last player has 4 spots. But these are just places where you can stick animals if you have extra ones. And so in this case, that's the only place that you could pull it from. But if you had animals on other enclosures on your in your zoo, you can pull them from those as long as you're not leaving that enclosure empty. And you can place up to 2 of the same type. Now obviously this player can't because they have 2 different types, so they can put 1 flamingo or 1 meerkat in this spot, and that's all they can do. So I'd put a meerkat in, and now the only thing that they can do is place meerkats in this enclosure. Now it's my turn. Now it gives you these 2 different options: pick enclosure, get animals. Really, you're just looking at the spaces ahead. So I'm looking at this blue space, this polyomino, this blue space, and this one. Those are my options here. Now, with a polyomino game, it's always nice to be able to kind of fiddle around and figure out what's going to fit and what's not, especially here because you've got some weird shaped ones. And so you can do a few things. You can go into practice mode for BGA, and then you can take any of them. And there's a couple things. You can either click and place, or you can drag. So I could take this one and I can just drag it wherever I want, and then I have options to rotate or to flip. So I can rotate it, you can see it doesn't work that way, or I can flip it. Now whenever you are looking at it, you can see these different target areas, so that each polyomino has some anchor point. And so if you're just going by touch, for example, if you're like on a phone, or you don't do the drag and drop, then you can use this target to say, okay, that target spot can go in any one of these spots here. So it could go here and it would fit, right? Or here and it would fit. But none of these spots would let it fit because it would overlap outside. So that is a way to kind of mess around with it. But again, if you're just on a computer and you have a mouse, dragging works great. And then again, you can always rotate and flip. The other thing is, when you are in the actual play, it doesn't seem to have it here. There will usually be, I'll show you in just a second. So that's practice mode. You can take from any of them. So I could take this one here. You know, you could take multiples. Again, we're just here in practice mode, playing around with them. See, okay, if I can get this one, and then the next turn I can get this one here. Maybe those 2 fit together. You know, you're looking and seeing how these fit, whatever it may be. The controls can be a little finicky, I will admit, but the practice mode kind of just lets you do some of that. The other thing is, so with the ones that I actually have access to, so these 2 here, if I decide to take one, again, it shows me those different options here, and you'll see I've got the controls up here, and I have the controls here, so I can rotate it here, and I can flip it here. And again, the same idea happens, but again, if you're on a computer with a mouse, you can drag as well. I know I'm spending a lot of time on it, but it is finicky sometimes, and so it's good to know what your options are. That you can use those targets to set that anchor point, or you can drag, you can rotate and flip up here, or you can rotate and flip down here as well. All right, so as we continue to add, so I added that one, and then place from the enclosure. We're going to continue to fill out these things. Now that's when you go on a polyomino. You see what that looks like. You go on a polyomino, you place it on in your zoo, and then you place an animal on it. If you don't have any animals to place, like all of your enclosures have just 1 in them and you don't have any in your barn, you can't go on a polyomino spot. You have to be able to place at least 1. But you can place up to 2 from the same spot, either from your barns or from other enclosures. The second thing you can do is go on one of these blue spots. If you go on a blue spot, you have to at least take one of the animals, and then you can take both. So let's say I went here instead. I could have taken a meerkat and placed it in my barn. And then if I wanted to, I could take a flamingo, but at that point I didn't have any enclosures on it. But let's say I came all the way back around and I came here again. I could take the meerkat, stick it in one of my barns because I don't have a spot for it, and I could take the flamingo and put it right on my polyomino. You could also, instead of taking these 2, take one of any other type of animal, and that's all you get. You could also take just one of those if you wanted as well. You can choose one of any animal, or you can take both of the animals pictured. Typically, it's best to take both, unless you're really desperate for that one animal. You're going to want to take both because it's always good to have just animals around. Now, why do we have animals? Why do we put animals on enclosures? Well, if you fill up an enclosure, again with the same animal, so if I filled every single spot here, because each of them have different spots, and note they're different sizes, the darker green, the larger they're going to be, and in fact these stacks, you can see they start with the larger ones, but underneath are the smaller ones. Like this one has 7, this one has 6, but they can get, this one here has 5, so they get smaller as they go, which is good because you need to fill smaller spots as we go. But when you fill up every single spot, every single square on a polyomino, then you fill that enclosure, you pull all of the animals off. If you have space in your barns, you can stick one back in there. So if I had all flamingos here, I could pull them all off, stick a flamingo in the barn, and then you get to choose one of these enclosure or one of these attraction tiles to put in your zoo. Why do you want to do that? Well, again, you're filling in spots. It's the fastest person to fill in their zoo. And so these are really important to be able to do that. Now, some of them are just good at taking up a lot of space, right? But some of them are going to fill in those key spots, especially if you leave any holes. And there are a limited number. There's only one of these, 4, but there's 3 of these, 6 of those, and as many of the single tiles as are needed. So the game is going to be a constant of filling up your enclosures, adding new polyominoes, and eventually when you fill those up, adding also these attraction tiles in a race to fill up your board. Now the final aspect are these these tan spaces as well. Now, as soon as somebody passes over a tan space, in this case the next person passed over that meerkat tan space, that means there's a meerkat breeding event. And any player that has 2 meerkats in an enclosure, in a single enclosure, will get a third. They have a baby. And you can do that up to 2 times for 2 different enclosures. Not more than that, but if you had 2 different enclosures that both had at least 2 meerkats on it, you could add a third from the supply. It doesn't have to be from your own supply. So I'm going to jump forward a bit so we can kind of see what that would look like. Okay, here's a little bit later in the game. You can see everybody has 3 to 4 large enclosures. Nobody's gotten an attraction tile yet, but people are starting to fill things up. This player already has 4 of their 7 spots filled up with the flamingo. Again, the larger enclosures take up more spaces, which is nice, but they take longer to fill up, so it's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to, in my turn, move to this spot to get a meerkat and a flamingo because I want to set up some breeding events. So I go here, and this is what it lets you do. You can either place both of these blue animals or just one of any animal. And so I decide to place a flamingo first. Now, it's important to note that whenever you place an animal in an enclosure from one of these blue spots, you have also one from in your houses, you can place it as well. So in this case, I can pull in this flamingo as a kind of bonus placement because I had it in my house when I placed this flamingo in the house as well. I just have to click yes, and it pulls in the flamingo for me from one of my houses. Then I'm going to place the meerkat, and I place it here. So now I have 2 meerkats here and 3 flamingos here, and I know that when we pass this meerkat breeding event, I will get a 3rd meerkat, and that's going to probably happen in the next turn or 2. Okay, so not that turn. They wanted to go that one spot, but green player then passed the meerkat breeding event. They're going to first take their turn and finish their turn, and then in order, starting with that player and then going in turn order, alright, and so after they have finished doing their actions for placing animals, then the breeding event takes place. And that current player starts by doing any meerkat breeding they have, and they have one here. In fact, most players have at least one. You can have up to 2 that you breed. And so they will start, and they will add it. Then it's my turn. I can place one, and I just basically choose the 2 enclosures, and you just pick a spot in each enclosure and say confirm, and it puts one in. Now remember, anytime that you place a new animal in an enclosure, if you have that same type of animal in your houses, you can bonus add it into as well. And that's for both placing new tiles and adding a tile, or that's for placing, new enclosures. That's for when you place animals to the blue tiles, or when you breed, you're adding to that tile. If you have one in your house, it can come in as well. So you keep that in mind as you go through. And then the last player will add theirs as well, and so on and so forth. And so it continues on. People still continue to try to fill up their enclosures so that they can get these action tiles, because you can see there's already some people making some holes that they're going to have to fill in with these attraction tiles. And at the right, a nice thing here, this is kind of a little bit of a tracking on how many spaces have to be filled for each player. And so that's a bit of the race to 0 in this game. And on the turn that one person fills up their board, the game ends and that person wins. If the filling up the board happens because somebody gets an attraction tile after filling up their enclosure because of a breeding event, so it's not their turn but they do fill up their board, then they win as well. If more than one person fills it, then you count up the number of animals on the board, and that's kind of the tiebreaker for it. But that's a pretty rare case, but there is that contingency in there. So you're going around and around, adding enclosures, filling up with animals. When you fill up with animals, you get these attraction tiles to continue filling. That's what you're trying to do. You're filling this up as best as you can, as quick as you can, and the first one to fill it up is the winner. Hope this was helpful. Thanks.